Hey, welcome! Today I'm going to take this tank out. I installed the diesel tank about half a year ago. I think it was video 29, and I've been using it for half a year. Today I'm going to remove it for two reasons. Number one, I don't know how much diesel's in it, so I run it dry, and then it takes a long time to prime the fuel again, the pump. So I want to fix that. I want to have some kind of gauge. I don't know if I'm going to build one or buy one or whatever I do, it's going in there. And the second reason I'm taking it out is because this one leaks. So let's fix it.
Let's start by removing the forward rock guard.
Okay, I'm under the van. I've just removed the rock guard. It's right here. So this is now open, the fuel supply, or the fuel feed rather. The supply is at the end. What I'm looking for is I'm looking for a gap area, like up in here. I've got a lot of spare space right above the pipe, right in here. It looks to be fairly congested right in this area. However, back here, there's another hole right in here. There's an opening above it, and there's one more back here. So I think what I'm going to do, I need that area above because I'm going to modify this tank. I'm going to modify this tank to put a fuel reader on the top and possibly a laser shooting down into the tank to read the fuel level. We'll see what I finally end up with. But anyways, I need some real estate above the tank. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to mark the center of this opening. Just mark it on the tank. As well as this one here. And there's one more back there. And once I get the tank out of the way, I'm going to pick one of those three areas. In which case, if I pick this area, I'll be modifying the tank here by cutting it, putting a new fitting in with a receiver on the top. So let's see how that unfolds.
Removing a few plastic ties securing the fuel line. There are just two main metal straps that support the tank.
Okay. Okay. Come on up. Okay, got it.
This is a nylon fitting, and this is where the tank was leaking. I don't believe it was leaking because the part is nylon. I believe it was leaking because I used the incorrect thread sealer. Now here's the tank as designed in video 29. Filler tube at one end, fuel supply line on the bottom, and tank vent at the highest point on the end. This piece, this 4-inch ABS plastic hub cleanout T with plug, is going to be my new fuel sender housing. The cleanout T comes with a plug, and I will modify this piece to make my mounting surface for the fuel sender. So this is what the finished fuel tank will look like. I'll cut the tank at a specific spot where there's clearance above the tank to make room for the fuel sender housing. Next, I need to measure the interior depth of my fuel sending housing in order to purchase the correct fuel sender, one that'll work. It looks to be about maybe 137 millimeters. Looks like 137 millimeters. With the plug back in place, I need to measure the thickness of the lid, as that too is calculated as part of the fuel sender's height. To me, it looks to be about 8.5 millimeters. So 8.5 millimeters plus 137 millimeters equals 145.5 millimeters times .0393 equals about 5.7 inches. So the sender I picked up was from Princess Auto. This sender says it'll work for tanks with depths from 5 inches to 23.5 inches. My clearance was 5.7 inches, so this should work. The gauge that I selected to read the sender's ohms is this 12-volt gauge, again from Princess Auto. Prior to drilling a hole in the lid of my PVC fuel sender housing, I wanted to test to see what is the smallest hole I could get away with. So here I am drilling a hole in a scrap piece of Baltic birch.
Well, that totally worked.
Then I moved on to the fuel sender housing plug, first drilling a hole, and then later I just removed the entire protrusion.
That's thick. Okay. Got to remove this. Yep.
My first attempt at removing the protrusion, I used a Dremel tool with a cutoff wheel. Unfortunately, the depth of the cutoff wheel was less than the thickness of the PVC, so I switched to a hacksaw.
It's not bad. Well, check this out. Like, that is going to totally work. I'll center that, drill the holes. I'll sand it down a little bit, smooth it off, but that'll be our gauge. Really nice flat surface to mate to. It's got a few little ridges there, it's fine.
So here is my completed fuel sender housing. It looks pretty good.
So let me show you what I'm up to. I'm testing this system, both the fuel level sender and the fuel gauge I picked up at Princess Auto, I think 24 or 25 bucks a piece, and trying to support local. I'm going to be returning these two. I kind of thought this was going to happen. This is actually a 4-inch pipe. However, I do have a 5-inch opening because of I'm in this T intersection area, and that's great. But the problem is this particular sender is designed for 5 inches to, I can't remember, a larger number, like 23 inches or something. So quite a variety. I have it set up right now for 5 inches. And having said that, because I'm in a 4-inch pipe, yes, the sender physically fits, but I'm not going to get the full range of motion. So as an example, right now we are right at the top in the, I'm going to call it the full position. The float is right at the top. And if you look over at our gauge, I'm reading just under half. And that's as high as this is going to ever get. So yes, I technically have it working. Let's get that reflection off of there. There we go. I have it working, but the range is wrong. So if I drop this, I'm going to bring my finger in here and lower this down. I'll show you that, lowering it down. And you can see over here, she's coming down. It's slow, which is good. It means if there's sloshing or something like that, it doesn't react immediately. But I'm going to bring this into the half tank position right now. So we'll bring it up to, about there. See where that puts us over here. Yeah, that's not entirely moving. It's come up a little bit to the E. So if I was to use this system, I'd have to be recognizing the fact that, okay, I got half a tank when it's pointing at E. And that's fine. You could mark it up with a Sharpie or something. Let's go a little higher. Hold her there. See what that brings us. That's climbing a little bit. Not much though. Boy, it's slow too. All right, let's bring her all the way to the top again and wait for it to respond. See if I can squeeze any more out of it, get it right to the very, very top. There we go, hold her there. That's about it, eh? So Yes, I have this working. No, I'm not going to use this one. There's nothing wrong with this one, but because it's at the cheapest end of the scale, it's not adjustable. And I need to be able to adjust the receiver, the gauge, to recognize the number of ohms that are being produced at the full and empty as being the respective full and empty. And this one, because it's a cheapie, I can't do any of that. So I'm going to send this one back and pick something up at Amazon. I've tried all the local suppliers. Nobody has anything. So I'll pick something up at Amazon, which is adjustable. And but the proof of concept is here. It's definitely going to work. So I'll meet you when I got another gauge. Okay, I'm now going to measure the different ohms that I'm getting from this fuel sender. So I have, just right at the top of the screen here, I have the black lead to the ground and the positive lead to the signal. There's no power to this whatsoever. All I'm doing is measuring the resistance. So right now at an empty tank, I'm sitting at 155 ohms. And as I move, as the tank fills up, you can see that resistance changes. Till a full tank, I'm down to, looks about 74 ohms. So my range is going to be from 155, 154, something like that, up to 74 ohms, something like that. That'll be my range. Now, the thing is this will need to be calibrated because none of the gauges that you purchase are set up for full, being 74 ohms, and empty being 155. So that's why I need to buy one that I can program. The second thing is this pipe right here is closer to 5 inches because it's a fitting. The actual fuel tank is 4 inches. So I'm going to install the 4-inch tank now, and I'll show you the difference. All right. So now it's resting on the bottom of the 4-inch tank, and you can see that my empty is now 146 ohms. So I'm going to somehow get my arm in there and raise it. All right, so full tank is going to be 81 ohms. And empty, about 145. So this is totally going to work. As soon as my programmable fuel gauge comes in, I'll be able to install this. In the meantime, I'm going to cut the pipe and start finding out where this piece is going to fit.
In the end, I returned the fuel gauge, but I kept the fuel sender. When the new fuel gauge arrives, I should be able to calibrate it to this fuel sender. This is a good picture showing how I bent my float rod to work inside the 4-inch pipe and at the same time remain removable in the event I have to service this part in the future.
And this is where it is going to be mounted. The front strap is here. I was originally hoping to put it right in this area here, but there actually isn't enough space above it. And if you recall earlier, I was showing there's 3 cavities. There's enough space here. Let's call it 52 7/8. So after I put the fuel sending unit, the housing installed, I'll be looking for those dimensions again. Okay, I've cut the pipe and I've temporarily installed the fuel sender housing. And last I checked, it was 52 7/8. I'm shorter right now. I am 52 9/16. So that's fine. Both of these collars are buried 1 3/4 inches. If I want to make it longer, I could bury them 1 1/2 and glue it accordingly. But before I adjust anything, I'm actually just going to go see if this fits in the van. And And I won't be gluing up anything until I get the actual gauge so I can calibrate it before I assemble it. So here's the new fuel tank. It fits like a glove. So I don't think I'm going to change anything. I'm not going to assemble it right now. I'll do that in a little bit. I'm now going to tackle the part that leaks.
So this is all ABS pipe, and I tried to stick with ABS for everything because there's good documentation around ABS and diesel. They work well together. I could not get this fitting right here in ABS. This is nylon. I have two pieces that thread into each other.
So this is a close-up of the nylon parts that are leaking. And I've taken them apart, and I can see that I did in fact use some tape on them when I installed them. Probably something like this. But like I said, they are leaking, and I don't know what the ratings are or what the long-term durability is of nylon with diesel. I know I've got no issues with the PVC, but I was unable to get these fittings in PVC. So I'm going to do a couple things. I'm actually going to see if, I'm going to look again to see if I can find these two fittings, or essentially get from this to this using PVC. And secondly, I've got to look for a different thread sealant. Now I have this sealant here, which I've used on aircraft fuel fittings, and it works exceptionally well. However, I was reading the small print on it, and I've enlarged it here, and it says not for use on plastic parts. So that's out. So I've got to do a little bit more research yet to sort this out, but don't have the answers right now.
So a few days have passed, and this is what I picked. It's Masters Pro Dope. Now here's what sold me on the product. Now look at their recommended uses. Both nylon and ABS are in this list, and I'm using both of those to make up this connection. And finally, they have a comprehensive list of gases and liquids that this thread sealer will work with, and I'm pleased to see diesel fuel listed. So this is it. This should work. Now, this stuff is not cheap. I picked this up at Home Hardware, and with the taxes, it was just shy of 30 bucks. It better work. I probably have too much on the threads here, but having zero experience with it and recognizing the amount of work involved in removing a leaking tank a second time, I was liberal with the paste.
So I'm looking inside the back half of this tank because I was about to prepare it for the install. And take a look at that. It looks like the gasket or the rubber seal around the air vent is already failing. So I got to look into that now.
Yes, the O-ring had failed. So I walked next door and picked one up from a buddy. Thanks, Dan, and I'll reassemble this again. The two screened vent holes need to be at the top of the tank. Not being able to determine this part's position once it's inside the tube, I marked the pipe itself to mark the upside.
That looks a little better. So my new fuel gauge has come in. Here it is right here. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. I have temporarily connected, there's some procedures that they talk about that need to be followed in order to connect it for the first time. So I have been following those to the T. Over here, I have the fuel sender back in the fuel sender housing.
I have a towel stuffed in the end of the tube for the sole purpose of holding the float in the full position.
And let's connect this to power for the first time. Okay, we'll let it settle in until we get a final reading of where it thinks it currently is. Okay, now I find this interesting. Just like our last gauge, the analog gauge, at the full position, this gauge is indicating less than half. Now, having said that, the difference is this one can be adjusted. So let's see what we can adjust it to. Oh, that's the wrong way. That is so cool. Okay, so now it's reading full. Okay, the next thing it says to do is to empty the tank and see where it settles. So that's reading full. That's great. The tank is full. I'm going to pull the towel out now. Let's see if I can do this gently. Okay, and the fuel is going to be going down. I'm not seeing anything. All right. I saw no change whatsoever, and the tank is completely empty. The float is at the very bottom. So let's adjust it again. All right. Now let's add fuel. I don't think we've achieved anything. We're right back where we started before. I'm going to leave it right there. That's 2 from the top. Let's call that full and see where empty shows up. This piece of crap. Well, that's interesting. That's not horrible. If I was to use it like that, I'd have the 4 blue bars, each representing 1/4 of a tank. So without changing that setting, I'm going to pull out the towel, and the tank's empty. It should come down to the red and the yellow. One more should disappear, eh? And there it goes. So I think I've decided to keep this fuel gauge. I can accurately record I guess 1/4 of a tank now, which is important. So I've got 4 measurements which are showing up consistently. I have made one more change. I've dropped this arm right down to the bottom here. And in the distance there, you can see the float. And this just means that the float now, in its bottom position, isn't all the way down like that. Its bottom position is kind of like this. And therefore I'm working from here to there, which is just a different range in the ohms. For example, in the empty position right now, I'm sitting at 140 ohms. And the full, well, let's get a reading right now real quick. Let's take a look. What does it say? Yeah, I'm under 70. I'm 69 ohms. So it's a slightly different range. Now that doesn't mean that much, but it does seem to make a difference to the actual fuel gauge. The second thing I did is I actually shortened the arm of the float. I made it as short as possible. And therefore, let's say it's pivoting here. It can go from here to there and get a larger range than out like this and moving a smaller range. So I've got it like this now. So we're going to call that done.
Here I am just marking the top of the tank. I need to do this to aid in assembly. Fuel level housing at the top, fuel supply line at the bottom, air vent at the top. You have to work quickly with this stuff. There's no second chance.
Okay.
Here I am one more time using this thread dope for something that it's not made for. Just filling in those little voids we talked about earlier. There are only 2 connections here. Why do I have 3? Well, accurately reading ohms or resistance is dependent on a solid ground. Since I don't have a metal fuel tank that is grounded to the vehicle's grounded frame, I have to ground directly to the fuel sender's body. I am uncomfortable with a single screw holding the ground wire firmly against the fuel sender's body, so I added a second wire. Over time, if a screw was to somehow vibrate loose, I will still have a second screw providing the gauge a solid ground. I'm using a small piece of wire shrink wrap to keep the wires neat and tidy. I'm installing quick disconnects here, in the event this tank needs to be removed in the future. No wires to cut, just unplug it. I am protecting the wires further with some 1/4 inch loom. Starting to look like an automotive part. Fun stuff. There's only room for one of us. All right, tank is back in. I'll show you a couple things.
All right, there's the back of the tank, and this is the air line, the vent, which goes back up to the filler tube. There's the tank, goes all the way down. You can see it there. Right down, rock guards installed. This is the new part right here. The fuel level housing, and you can see the little area that would fit right up inside. And the electrical, of course, is visible there, and I have it popping through. Oh, there you go, right there, right through the floor. And it pops up on the other side, just underneath the drawer in the kitchen cabinet, which is perfect. Fuel tank is in. I have the fuel gauge currently outside. I've got a number of wires coming here. I've got ground and power coming from the van. I have signal and ground coming from the fuel sender. So I'm sitting at completely empty here, and I have it outside because I'm going to add diesel right now, and I'm going to do it in 2-liter increments. I don't know if you can read that or not. That's exactly 2 liters. So I'm going to put 2 liters in and see if that does anything to the gauge, and if it does or doesn't, I'll record it. So 2 liters is in the tank and nothing is registering. I have just adjusted this pot, so 2 liters registers as yellow. I now have 4 liters in the tank and no change in the fuel gauge. Not good. 6 liters in the tank, no change. I'm going to give the housing a little tap, see if it's stuck. All right. Maybe we should have done that earlier. Okay, so what did I say? 6 liters and 2 bars. I think it might have just been stuck on the bottom. I wouldn't be surprised if it, a little, you know, if the, let's use English here. I wouldn't be surprised if at 4 liters it was reading the bottom blue, but we're reading 2 blue now, which is excellent for 6 liters. Let's try some more. Keep going. Okay, here comes 8 liters. Do we have another bar? We do. Okay. So 8 liters is 3/4 full, which is correct. Okay, here comes 10 liters. Okay, that's just a pinch over 10 liters. Tap the tank, see if it's done anything. And it's still showing just 3 bars. So let's fill the tank. It's got to be close to being full now. Hey, we have 4 bars. That's cool. Okay, well that's totally working. Very cool. I can install it now. Our diesel heater manual says that it consumes between 0.11 liters and 0.51 liters per hour. The difference in burn rate is dependent on whether the heater is increasing the temperature in the van or maintaining a temperature. Using this information conservatively, I've come up with the following measurements for our new fuel gauge. If only the red bar is displayed, the tank is empty. If the yellow bar is lit, the tank has 2 liters in it and about 5 hours remaining. If 1 blue bar is lit, the tank has 4 liters and 10 hours remaining. If 2 blue bars are lit, 6 liters and 15 hours remaining. If 3 blue bars are lit,
8 liters and 20 hours remaining. And if all 4 bars are lit, 10.5 liters and 26 hours remaining. Awesome.
So with this fuel gauge working and calibrated, time to install it. Well, it didn't come with a mounting bracket, so I had to make one.
The gauge is 2 inches, and I have a 2-inch hole saw. I drilled a 2-inch hole in some scrap aluminum. I added a couple of bends to a second piece of scrap and then drilled an access hole for the gauge's wires. Anytime I'm working with small pieces of aluminum with the table saw, I cleco the parts to a piece of wood, more substantive, and it allows me to keep my fingers clear while I'm working with the table saw. These mounting screws are incredibly small. With 2 parts made, I will now countersink the face rivets and install. Rounded the corners on the grinder and smoothed the finished pieces on the sander. 3 coats of paint and I left it to sit overnight. With the bracket made, I pulled the trim off the driver's side C-pillar, as this is where I wanted to mount the fuel gauge. The diesel controller is mounted here. I needed to just slightly enlarge the access hole, which will allow me to countersink the fuel gauge in the wall. I then temporarily clecoed my new bracket to the back side of the trim to center and trace the opening size. I used a jigsaw to cut out the opening. Then I riveted the fuel gauge brackets to the face. Off camera, I drilled a hole and installed a switch that I had left over from a previous project. Here I'm soldering that and installing a heat shrink. This switch will be used to turn the fuel gauge on.
Okay, now power coming from the switch, which is this one, goes to the gauge, which is black. Okay, so before I had put this in, let's see if it actually works. I'll go put a fuse breaker in, see if it works. Okay, so fingers crossed this will light up. And it does, and it's calibrating. So let's turn it off and install. Holy crow, it fits. Okay, we'll put that up in a minute. Leave that to last. Let's put in a couple, one down here. Okay, here we go. Okay, it's working. And calibrating. That is so cool. I gotta say, this was a way bigger project than I thought it was. Hey, thanks for watching.